Welcome, everyone, to the 9th installment of the Senior Leadership Insights Series, sponsored by the Graduate School and offered in partnership today with the Department of Chemistry. The series was created and developed by a group of volunteers from the Graduate Board of Visitors, some of whom are joining us in the audience today. My name is Melissa Bostrom, and I am the Assistant Dean for Graduate Student Professional Development at the Graduate School. To make the most of our very focused time together, I'll address a couple of logistics up front. We'll begin the conversation with 6 key questions that we ask each of our featured guests. And after that, we'll welcome your questions. If you'd like to speak, you can use the raise hand option accessible through the reactions button in the lower right-hand corner of your Zoom window. This session is being recorded, so if you prefer not to appear in the recording, please keep your video muted and you can share questions in the chat. So with those details out of the way, I'd like now to briefly introduce Dr. Katherine Franz, who is Alexander Haymeyer Professor and Chair of the Department of Chemistry. Research in the Franz Lab is involved in elucidating the structural and functional consequences of metal-ion coordination in biological systems. And they're particularly interested in understanding the coordination chemistry utilized by biology to manage essential yet toxic species like copper and iron. Dr. Franz is a Sloan Research Fellow. She is a winner of the Duke Graduate School's Dean's Award for Excellence in Mentoring, winner of the Trinity College of Arts and Sciences Dean's Award for Diversity, and winner of the American Chemical Society Award for encouraging women into careers in the chemical sciences. Professor Franz, I'll turn things over to you to introduce our special guest today, Dr. Lori Lehman.
Thank you, Melissa, and welcome everybody. It's nice to see some familiar faces on the Zoom screen and some chemistry students and others, so welcome. And I'm thrilled to introduce our guest today, Dr. Lori Lehman. Most recently, she served as Vice President for Research Strategy at Portfolio Management at Gilead Sciences. While she was at Gilead, her team was involved in making the drug remdesivir. If that name sounds familiar, it hit a lot of headlines. It was one of the earliest and most promising treatment options for COVID-19. She spent nearly 40 years in the pharmaceutical and biotech industries in many roles, spanning research and development to business development to research strategy. And she's been with organizations like Schering-Plough, Amylin, RiboGene, and Gilead. She's led several research and development projects and managed collaborative relationships with large and small pharmaceutical companies and academic research groups. She received her BS and MS in chemistry with an MS in organic chemistry from Bucknell University, which Lori is right down the road from where I grew up. I don't know if we knew that we had that in common. No. And her PhD in organic chemistry from Duke. So it's great to have her back. She's currently a member of the Graduate School's Board of Visitors. So we like to have chemists in those roles. It's wonderful. And it's a pleasure to welcome her back for this virtual conversation today. So Lori, maybe if we start, if you want to tell us a little bit about your background and maybe the path to your current role from maybe what did you think you wanted to be when you grew up to here, to where you landed.
You know, I didn't think about that of what I wanted to be when I grew up. I think I wanted to be an MD, and I this BS program at Bucknell where you got both degrees in 4 years, taking a heavier load and also working the summers. And I decided my senior year in college that I really loved organic chemistry. So I totally went a different direction and decided to go on for my PhD in organic chemistry, and I went to Duke. And then after doing my research there for about 3.5 years, I went to Schering-Plough, and I was going to go for a postdoc and made the switch to industry. I think I wanted to try it out. I think I was interested in more applied applications to organic chemistry. And so I did sort of a traditional route and went in to be a medicinal chemist, which is different from being an organic chemist because you're really interacting with a lot of different functions. I really learned drug discovery at Schering-Plough. And then I went to the biotech industry after 6 years. Didn't realize how much I had learned about the drug discovery. Went first chemist in a biotech, was the head of the grew into be the head of the department. For personal reasons, I moved to Northern California and was the head of R&D for RiboGene. And I think when I was at Amylin, I started leading projects. So not only was I department head, but I was leading projects. We had a collaboration with Glaxo, which is Research Triangle, it was. And so I just found this knack of working with people, understanding the science, and really having fun. And so my career sort of just kept on following that. I've led projects, I've led collaborations, had one with UNC even, with large pharmas, small pharmas. I've been at Gilead, or was at Gilead, for almost 20 years. And there I played a couple different roles, just taking on new challenges as they came about. I was so busy in 2010, I didn't realize I worked as a small part of getting HCV drugs approved. We're cured the disease, and I was a small part of it, and changing the landscape for HIV patients. And so I think the whole thing, I felt like what I've been doing was applying what I learned at Duke and Bucknell in organic chemistry to the field of human health. And it takes a whole lot of people. It's not just one or two people. It takes thousands to make this happen. And I feel like I've worked with great people. I've really had an impact, a small part, but an impact on human life. And so I just feel incredibly proud to be part of several organizations where I worked with great people.
That's great. And I love about your story, you described it as a kind of traditional path, and yet it wasn't what you had thought you set out to intend to do, but it sounds like you really built on these experiences and kept going and ended up back in kind of human health, which is where you sort of started thinking you had something. So I love that about the story you shared. And you've had so many different roles. So I'm going to guess that you don't have a typical day. But maybe pick a time, in one of those roles that maybe give a sense of what a day or a week, maybe the kinds of things that you would do in a week at some stage along the way. Could be what most recently, or pick one kind of along that career stage, and how those tasks might change as you've moved through into more leadership type positions.
Yeah, I grew out of the lab early on. I think my second job at Amylin. In fact, I remember my boss said to Lori, you need to give up your bench, and because I always loved lab work. But it seemed like the other roles were more important. Leading teams, whether it was a medicinal team or whether it was a project team, and moving something into development. So it was just much more satisfying. And I think it's harder to be a good leader. And so I evolved, and I would say my last 25 years at least, maybe more than that, have really been working with project teams, working with scientists, mentoring other project team leaders to help them be successful and navigate through the issues that come up at the interfaces of different sciences. So a typical day might have been in a meeting where we're looking at high level, where a strategy and rolling it out for, I led the portfolio analysis for several years at Gilead, where I'm meeting with all the executives and we're making decisions of where we're going to focus and how we're going to change the portfolio, to mentoring women's groups within it, because so often, especially in sciences like you've done, I didn't have a role model. And I was the first woman Ph.D. hired in my first job. And that came with certain challenges you commit. And I just wanted to be one of the scientists, not the first woman PhD hired in a while. So I've learned a lot from these situations. And I've really tried to help other women. And actually I do a lot of mentoring of men as well. Once you get so many years behind you, to help everyone get to the finish line quicker, to help them be successful, not to learn from my mistakes or other mistakes that I've observed throughout my career.
I'm glad you mentioned that. And there were a few questions that were sent in advance. And since you were just talking about mentoring women and being the first female PhD, and maybe I'll bring one of those questions in since we were just talking about it.
Sure.
Do you feel that in industry, maybe the industries you've been involved in, or your specific company, is supportive of women and people of color in a conducive way for them to be successful? or maybe the question is, since we know that that's not always an easy, full-hearted yes, but what are the things, what does that look like? What should people be looking for if they're looking for that kind of support, or red flags if they're not there?
Right. Let me just say the industry's evolved quite a bit in almost 40 years. I had a boss, my first job, tell me it was going to be a generation before a woman would get to be his level, and he was an associate director. I was a VP by the time I was 35. So that wasn't true, but that was the perspective of some people a long time ago. And I would have said, I'm not saying I've never dealt with it since then. There have been issues from peers too, maybe jealousy. I was able to talk the CEO to do something I wanted to, but I realized I've seen Gilead really evolve over the last 20 years, where they're really putting in support groups. I've led discussion groups for women as being a women executive to help them navigate different things from personal. I was a mom too, a single mom. So there's a lot of things in juggling, your health. I have always encouraged my teams to make sure they're taking care of themselves first. So it's not as much as my work and science is really important to me. Lori's more than that. I need to take care of myself. I need to take care of my family. And sometimes work comes first and sometimes family comes first. And I would say the industry as a whole is much more flexible now. We made it a point of making sure we're hiring diverse people. I've always felt that way because the diversity of ideas is really important. I think you come up better solutions. I always said, if everybody did what I want to do, we're going to fail. But if we come together and share ideas, we'll come up with the best plan and execute. And that comes with diversity. It's not just male and female, it's people from different backgrounds. And I know I was very proud of my team. We had several, I would say it was very diverse. It was, half Caucasian and half other races, different backgrounds. And I think that's what made us work so well together.
That's encouraging to hear a positive evolution, and no doubt you've been part of leading some of that. So thank you for paving the way there on some of those. You mentioned organic chemistry from Bucknell and Duke helped you prepare for your first jobs and get started, but what are some of the other things that you value from your doctoral training that have carried through? And then I'll have a follow-up.
Sure. I guess my answer to that would be, I wish I was at Duke right now because you guys—
We want you back.
You guys have so many tools that we didn't have. Melissa and Angela, I have one. I want to share it with my daughter who's in graduate school to seek out at her school whether she has some of the, like if you want to stay in academia, there's ways that, you just have tools that I didn't have. Back in my days, there wasn't a lot of collaboration. I did collaborate with a biochemistry lab, Erwin Friedrich, but that was unusual actually at that time. It was a very individual-based research. I talked and worked with postdocs and other graduate students in my lab and other labs. But it's evolved so much. Everything I've been doing in industry is team-based now. And I think the world, from what I've been seeing, observing the last 6 years at Duke, is a much better place. And I think if people take advantage of all the programs that are available to graduate students to help you support going into industry or academia, you're crazy if you don't take advantage of it. And I wish I had those tools and opportunities when I was at Duke. But it was a great experience, don't get me wrong.
That's great to hear. And maybe some of those tools, I think it's really easy to focus on the technical skills, developing the technical skills for students to see that. I think those of us on the other side and in these leadership positions see the other aptitudes and how important they are to putting a whole career together. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit to the audience about the kinds of, beyond the technical skills, but the team-based things, the leadership skills, the other aptitudes, the things that you're talking about, people, there are more programs around that now. What do you look for when you're building your team? like, what are the kinds of experiences or things that signal to you this person might have what we need to do these team-based projects and
Right.
drive things forward?
Beyond understanding science, that's the baseline, and to be able to collaborate. One thing when you go into industry, you're learning, because as a chemist, I worked in all different therapeutic areas. So it's a great opportunity to learn. So you're looking for people that are curious and know what they don't know, but are willing to put in the time to understand, because they'll be more successful if they understand what is the background, what is the biochemistry around hepatitis C. So even though as I was managing projects, I was working with biologists, chemists, drug metabolism, all different functions. So I would encourage everybody, even if you left science, spend some time learning project management, because whether it's a remodel in your house, there's always different functions that come together and they got to talk to each other. And so to be able to understand the different functions for me in drug discovery and development helped me be more successful. So I'm, people that are willing to roll up their sleeves and take on a new challenge. And people that aren't always about me, because it's a team that's really important. And I think you need to be genuine. I've realized this over the years. It's really important to have integrity, live by your values, and be honest with your team. If you're not authentic, you're not going to be successful. And I want people to challenge me. Won't look up, at Gilead, I think we're pretty good. I wouldn't encourage a junior person to call the CEO, but that said, you could if it was something, important. And so it doesn't matter what level you are. Don't be afraid to challenge people around you, because like I said, I think you come up with better solutions.
I want to make sure we leave some time for some audience questions, but maybe one last question for me. If you want to share, you mentioned that you had a great time at Duke when you were in graduate school. Can you share a couple of memories of what you, some impactful moment from grad school that sticks with you?
Oh boy, going back into time. I remember working with a postdoc and his wife in my lab, and I think that was one of the most impactful. And they were from Lebanon, and this was in the early 80s, and it was a pretty challenging time. And on the other hand, I was working with Erwin Friedrich, who happened to be Jewish, and so right next to them, and their daughter was his daughter was in our lab. And I think I came away with, I had a great education at Duke, and a great professor, great colleagues in the lab, but I also learned about the importance of the community. And as being sort of sheltered in the chemistry lab I wasn't really aware of the external world. And I think that opened a door to me that was really important in the rest of my life too. Not to be so insulated, to understand different sides of the story, of what was going on, and have empathy for both sides. So I think that was one of the things I really think back that was impactful in my life.
It's always interesting to hear the things that aren't on the curriculum, but are the big takeaways that you weren't designed, but happened to be there. Melissa, there was another question that came in. Should I go ahead and ask that, or let people ask it?
I think asking that next question would be a great transition, and you can invite folks to get ready to share their questions live or in the chat now. Absolutely.
So there was a question, again, graduate students really thinking about their future and what's next. So I think this is big on their minds about academia versus industry, or challenges in transitioning from, scholarly life, student life into industry, followed up by are there do's and don'ts for a vertical climb in industry? So challenges transitioning from academia to industry, and advice on climbing up in industry.
Well, I didn't find it that challenging going to industry from Duke. I felt I was working in a lab. They usually give you a project to work on to get started, sort of like when you're in graduate school. But you realize there's a lot you don't know. And I sort of mentioned this before. So I don't know that I felt really any challenges. My biggest challenge, I think at my first company, because they had so much process in place and separation of things, there wasn't as much collaboration that I saw in the biotech industry. So I think that was more of where Duke, there was a little bit of competition. There was a lot at Schering-Plough, and it was an old organization. It'd been there. We're in the biotech, everybody was rolling up their sleeves, and it was much more team-based. And I think that's what you're going to find in any company nowadays, more of a team-based, even the older companies like Schering's part of Merck now. And I think for me, I wanted to try out applied research. And I've noticed that as I've been in each my company, we have scientific advisors that advise us, chemists, on how you make a molecule. But I've often, and scientific advisory boards from MDs to biologists, they learn more from us about what problems they could, and I think they go back and see, it opens their eyes a little bit too. Seeing what problems or people are working on, maybe they could use some of their research to work on, it would help their career too. So I think there's a good collaboration between academia and industry. And there has been, some of my best, closest colleagues are now, Mary Klotman used to be advisor at Gilead for many years. So I've met some great people through my career and learned a lot from them. But I would say, if you ask them honestly, they learn from each of our companies and some of the struggles and challenges we were facing too.
That's great. So I'm sure there are some questions from people in the audience, so you can feel free to write them in the chat, or raise your hand, or I think just unmute yourself and maybe dive in. We'd like to provide options.
UA?
Hazel, why don't you go ahead, and then UA, or you?
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Hi, Hazel.
Hey, Laura, you still remember me?
Yeah, I remember you.
Yeah, just a little bit brief for everyone else. I wrote a alumni profile for Laurie a while ago, and you can check that out. Yeah, yeah. And also, thank you for your advice. Now, I recently graduated from Duke, and I also started my career in the industry in the same area. I'm actually at Amgen, South San Francisco.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, as a newbie in this field, I have some questions, especially one thing I noticed is once I started here, I realized the responsibility for a new person in the industry is really restricted. Sometimes I feel like I'm in a little silo and working on my own project without really too many opportunities to reach out and be exposed to the other functions or other roles in the industry. I'm wondering, do you have any advice for me and also the new persons in the industry, how to get exposed?
Yeah, I've always encouraged people to reach out and set up some time, meet with them for lunch. People are always willing to talk to other people about what they're doing. And so I think just networking around Amgen, and I know from being in the Bay Area for many years, there's other outside biotech organizations. I'm sure with COVID, there were a lot of restrictions, but I would take advantage of just learning. I've hired several people from Amgen. I know it was different than Gilead, but I would say that wherever you are, like I said, network, find out what other people are doing. And maybe your first job isn't going to be your most favorite. Maybe you'll learn something else you want to do, because so often when you're in an academic environment, I didn't know what these other functions were doing in a pharmaceutical company, from clinical operations. I didn't understand regulatory. There's a lot of different professions where you can apply what you're doing and help really make a mark. And so I think there's a lot of ways you can grow. You don't have to stay just as a lab-based scientist. I didn't, not that I really wanted to give it up. So I would just say network.
Thank you very much.
Sure, Hazel.
Yeah, so Dr. Lehman, thanks so much for your sharing today. And I actually have a small question. I think you talked a little bit about the transition from academia to industry, and I wonder if, do you think internships is necessary or helpful for transition to industry?
I think you can do internships. Usually I see people more in college that are doing that. I think when you're in a PhD program, it's a little bit more difficult, but because it's hard to just pick up and leave your research unless you have the support of your advisor for 3 months. I'm not saying it can't be done, and you could be a trailblazer. I've talked to a lot of interns over my careers, and again, I would say the same thing to them. You get a feeling of what you're working on. You get a feeling. There was a lot of passion at Gilead about doing the right things for patients, and it wasn't superficial. And I think that's what brought people together. And I think you need to look for that and looking for a job to that. And you can get that in an interview. You can talk to people. What's the environment like? So it would be useful to get, and internships where I was working, we tried to get them exposure to the different areas in drug discovery and development. So it's not just about doing an internship in the lab, which you get at the university, but it's understanding how all these functions come together to achieve a goal.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Dennis, you had a question. Do you want to go ahead and ask it, or I can read it if not?
Sure, Kathy. Yeah, Lori, well, first of all, great job. Congratulations on a great career. One of the things that might be interesting for others to hear about is you've gone through several transitions as you've taken on different roles and moved from company to company. What are the things that you look for in making those decisions about when's the right time to make those transitions?
To be quite honest, my first two transitions were because of my family life. Moving with my husband were the first two. They were both great changes for me too. So but to be quite honest, that encouraged them. Then I started doing things more on my own. One had to be a company was taking a different direction, was moving more away from R&D into marketing products. Well, my background's R&D. And so my boss was the CEO, and I had Frank talk with him. So one thing I was doing when I was head of R&D was also doing a lot of business development. And so my next two jobs were sort of business development for just like 2 years at a time. One was a technology company for medicinal chemists, made me think about all the steps you go through as a chemist, and I really hadn't thought about it. And one was biotechnology, but my heart was back in R&D. So I sort of went with, I learned from each experience, and I was lucky to get this position at Gilead, and they allowed me to grow and take on more and more responsibility. So, I sort of go with my gut, but I really look for good people and, very collaborative people, and you sort of feel it. Good teams. And so a couple of them were, just like the company was evolving, it was time for me to do something new. But my last almost 20 years have been evolving within the same company, which has been a great growth opportunity to work across the company, and make a lot of good friends that I still have today and colleagues. So it's great to work with them.
Thank you.
Well, our time has come to an end. It has flown by. Thank you so much to the audience for your engagement and your wonderful questions today. It has been a delight to feature Dr. Lori Lehman in this conversation, and hearty thanks to Professor Katherine Franz for conducting the interview. We look forward to seeing many of you for future events in this series. We will take a brief pause during these final weeks of the semester, and we will resume the conversations this summer. Good afternoon to everyone.